Hey guys, just before we start, do us a favor. Simply click the follow button and like this episode so other people can discover it and benefit from this information.
Yeah, it really, really helps out.
This podcast is brought to you by the Ending Tremor Project, developer of TremorZen AI, the first ever AI app to help you manage your everyday tremor. Go check them out at endingtremor.com, and don't forget to join the waitlist.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not medical advice. It does not create a doctor-patient relationship. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional about your specific situation, and do not delay care because of something you heard here. If you think you have an emergency, call your local emergency number.
All right, so I want you to just picture the scene for a second. It's 2 a.m. The house is completely quiet, but your mind is just running an absolute marathon.
Oh yeah, that classic midnight anxiety loop. It's the worst.
It really is. Because earlier in the day, maybe you were just, pouring yourself a cup of coffee, or you were looking down while typing a text message and you saw it. Your hand was shaking.
Right. And you can't unsee it.
Exactly. Instantly, your mind just opens up this 2 a.m. fear clinic in your head. And the very first terrifying thought that flashes across your brain is almost always the exact same question.
Let me guess, do I have Parkinson's?
Yes. Do I have Parkinson's? So, to answer that, we have been digging through a massive stack of recent neurological studies, pathology reports, and clinical diagnostic guidelines.
And honestly, it's such a visceral, intense moment that so many people experience.
Mhm.
When you're just staring at your own hands, wondering if your nervous system is betraying you, it's an incredibly lonely place to be.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
That fear is completely valid. It deserves absolute respect. But we really need to establish something critical right out of the gate here.
Which is?
Fear is a terrible doctor. I mean, panic just does not diagnose accurately.
Right. It just catastrophizes.
Exactly. So the entire goal of our deep dive today is to take that panic and, replace it with clarity and actual data. We're going straight into the precise, fascinating, and honestly sometimes highly surprising differences between essential tremor, or ET, and Parkinson's disease.
Because a tremor is just a symptom, right? It's not a definitive diagnosis on its own.
Explicitly.
So let's start with the most obvious clue, the physical shake itself. Knowing the exact circumstances of when the shake happens is like the very first major clinical breadcrumb on the trail.
Yeah, we have to look really closely at the distinction between an action tremor and a rest tremor.
Okay, break that down for us.
So essential tremor is clinically classified as an action tremor. You'll sometimes see it in the medical literature as a postural or kinetic tremor.
Kinetic meaning movement.
Right. This means the shaking manifests when you're intentionally recruiting your muscles to perform a task.
Like holding a glass of water or applying makeup.
Or even just holding your arms outstretched against gravity. The mechanism here is that the tremor engages at the precise moment the voluntary muscle command engages.
So the muscle's trying to execute a specific job, and the neurological misfire just interrupts the signal.
Exactly. Parkinson's disease, conversely, typically presents as a rest tremor.
Meaning when you aren't doing anything.
Yeah, it happens when the limb is fully supported against gravity and the muscles are ostensibly relaxed.
So imagine your hands just resting quietly in your lap while you sit on the couch.
Right. That is exactly when the Parkinsonian tremor usually appears. But the really fascinating part is that often, the moment you intentionally engage that hand,
Like to reach for a remote control or a coffee mug.
yeah, the Parkinsonian tremor diminishes or completely stops.
That is so wild to me. It forces us to look at the mechanics of those two different realities.
It does. And to visualize this, think of an essential tremor like a camera lens, shaking precisely when you're trying to focus and take a picture.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. It severely disrupts the active task.
Right. And Parkinson's is more like a car engine idling roughly while it's just parked in the driveway.
But once you actually put it in gear and press the accelerator,
That rough idle smooths out and the car moves.
that makes perfect sense. And we can actually measure the mechanics of that rough idle versus that shaky camera lens through their frequencies,
Yeah,
right?
we can, yeah. Essential tremor operates at a noticeably faster frequency. It's typically between 5 to 10 hertz.
So it's a rapid oscillation.
Very rapid.
Yeah.
And it very often starts symmetrically, meaning it presents in both hands simultaneously.
Okay, both hands shaking at the same time.
Yeah.
Got it. And Parkinson's.
Parkinson's tremors are slower. They grind along at a much more deliberate 3 to 5 hertz.
Slower and rougher.
Yeah. And a major hallmark of Parkinson's is its asymmetry. It almost always begins on just one side of the body.
Oh, wow. So just the right hand or just the left?
Exactly. And it often remains significantly more severe on that dominant side for years before it crosses over to the other side.
Okay, but wait, how do doctors actually test this in the clinic without just, staring at your hands and trying to count the shakes?
Well, relying purely on visual observation isn't enough, which is why neurologists rely on functional tests to force those neurological pathways to reveal their deficits.
Like the handwriting test. That's one of the most classic examples.
It really is. When a patient with essential tremor attempts to write a sentence, the handwriting becomes large, jagged, and tremulous.
Because the physical amplitude of the tremor is literally forcing the pen strokes outward.
Exactly.
Right.
It creates these oversized, shaky letters. But Parkinson's disease results in the exact opposite phenomenon.
Micrographia.
Yes, the writing becomes progressively smaller, tighter, and slower the further they move across the page.
It shrinks.
It shrinks dramatically.
Yep.
And the mechanics behind micrographia are so fascinating because it's driven by two specific neurological deficits.
Akinesia and hypokinesia, right?
You got akinesia, which is an overarching slowness or loss of movement, and hypokinesia, which is a loss of momentum or force.
So the brain is literally failing to maintain the amplitude of the intended movement.
It just cannot sustain the necessary force to form the letters. So the physical output shrinks down as the motor system basically runs out of energy.
Wow. It's a profound visualization of the internal dopamine deficit.
It really paints a picture of what's happening inside.
Now, there's also a completely bizarre diagnostic quirk that we found involving alcohol.
Ah, yes. The alcohol test.
For many people with essential tremor, consuming just 1 or 2 alcoholic drinks, like a glass of wine or a single beer, will noticeably improve their tremor, like the shaking temporarily calms down.
Yeah, because alcohol acts as a central nervous system depressant. It interacts heavily with GABA receptors in the brain.
So it essentially dampens the faulty overactive signaling that's causing the ET?
Right. But alcohol has absolutely zero effect on a Parkinsonian tremor.
None at all.
None. So it acts as a fascinating clinical differentiator, though obviously relying on a Chardonnay prescription is not a viable long-term medical strategy.
Definitely not. Especially since the tremor frequently bounces back with even greater severity once the alcohol metabolizes.
Yeah, that's known as rebound tremor.
Yeah.
But it proves that these two conditions operate on fundamentally different chemical pathways.
Right, but this brings up a critical challenge. Because tremors occasionally present in mixed or highly confusing ways, don't they?
Oh, all the time. Sometimes a Parkinson's patient will develop an action tremor on top of their rest tremor.
Oh man, that's complicated.
Or an ET patient will exhibit tremors while their hands are supported. So when the visible physical shake blurs those diagnostic lines, physicians are forced to look beyond the hands.
They have to look for the invisible burden, the systemic, non-motor symptoms.
Exactly. Because Parkinson's is not an isolated tremor. It's a comprehensive, system-wide movement disorder.
So a neurologist isn't just looking at the hands, they're testing for rigidity.
Right, a literal stiffness in the limbs. It often manifests as cogwheel rigidity, where the arm moves in these jerky, clicking motions when passively rotated.
Like a literal gear catching.
Exactly. And they're also looking for bradykinesia, which is an overall slowness that affects walking gait, natural arm swing, and even the ability to make spontaneous facial expression.
Facial masking.
Yes, but the non-motor clues are massive differentiators too.
Right, like hyposmia, the severe loss of the sense of smell.
That is a highly predictive early warning sign for Parkinson's disease. People with Parkinson's have an 8 times higher risk of experiencing hyposmia compared to those with essential tremor.
8 times higher? That's huge. And you pair that with severe autonomic issues like urinary dysfunction and chronic intractable constipation.
And a much clearer clinical picture of Parkinson's emerges. You just do not typically see that specific cluster of autonomic failures in essential tremor.
Okay, I want to firmly pause here for a second, though, to redefine the narrative around essential tremor.
Please do.
Because historically, the medical community frequently referred to ET as benign essential tremor, simply because it lacked those severe systemic Parkinson's symptoms.
Yeah, that terminology is really outdated.
Calling essential tremor benign is incredibly insulting to anyone living with the condition. It just trivializes the profound daily struggle.
It really does. The word benign suggests it's harmless or, merely an inconvenience.
Exactly. Try eating a bowl of soup at a crowded restaurant, or signing a legal document at the bank, or holding a microphone to give a speech when you have a severe essential tremor.
It relentlessly chips away at a person's dignity, their professional confidence, in their independence.
People often completely withdraw from their social lives out of sheer embarrassment.
And furthermore, ET brings its own crushing invisible burden.
Yes. The clinical data strongly associates essential tremor with profound fatigue, persistent insomnia, and severe mood disturbances.
Specifically, anxiety and depression.
And anxiety floods the nervous system with adrenaline, which acts like turning up the amplifier on a stereo system that already has static.
Right, it makes the tremor significantly louder and more violent, whether it's ET or Parkinson's.
So if the outward symptoms can sometimes blur together and both drastically degrade a patient's quality of life, we have to ask what is actually happening inside the brain to cause these two distinct realities.
Let's look closely at the underlying biology.
So the breakdown in Parkinson's is a classic neurodegenerative model, right?
Yes, the core mechanical failure takes place deep in the midbrain in a region called the substantia nigra.
That tiny, dark, pigmented area.
Exactly, it's essentially the factory that produces dopamine.
And dopamine is the vital chemical messenger that acts like oil in the engine of your motor system. It regulates smooth, coordinated muscle movement.
Right. Once produced in the substantia nigra, dopamine travels along neural pathways to a region called a striatum.
And the striatum executes the actual motor commands.
Yes. But in Parkinson's, there is a progressive, relentless die-off of those dopamine-producing neurons in the substantia nigra.
So the supply of dopamine dries up.
And the signaling in the striatum becomes chaotic and starved. That starvation directly leads to the classic resting tremor, the cogwheel rigidity, and the profound slowness of movement.
Okay, but essential tremor operates on an entirely different geographical map of the brain.
It does. It's primarily linked to the cerebellum.
Which is the structure tucked at the very back of your skull that acts as the brain's fine-tuning and balance center.
Right. And for decades, the prevailing medical consensus was that ET did not cause actual structural damage to the brain.
They viewed it purely as an electrical misfire, just a glitch.
Yes. But modern pathology has completely upended that. When pathologists put the cerebellar tissue of deceased essential tremor patients under a microscope, they found structural abnormalities.
Real physical damage.
Yeah. They documented a significant loss of Purkinje cells, which are the massive branching neurons responsible for outputting regulatory signals from the cerebellum.
And even stranger, they found that the axons, the long transmitting cables of these surviving cells, were heavily swollen into these bizarre shapes.
Yeah, pathologists literally named them torpedoes.
Torpedoes. And alongside the torpedoes, they found unusually dense, tangled networks of nerve fibers wrapping around the Purkinje cells.
Which they designated hairy baskets.
Hairy baskets. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. When you have swollen torpedo axons and tangled hairy baskets wrapping around your neural wiring, you are essentially looking at a massive neurological traffic jam.
That's a great way to describe it.
The regulatory signals trying to leave the cerebellum to steady your hand just hit the structural static. That stuttering, disrupted signal manifests physically as the action tremor.
Exactly. So we have dopamine depletion in the substantia nigra for Parkinson's and structural traffic jams in the cerebellum for essential tremor.
But here's the catch. A neurologist cannot crack open a living patient's skull to hunt for hairy baskets or count dopamine neurons during a routine Tuesday afternoon clinic visit.
No, they definitely cannot. They need a window into the living brain.
And that window is a highly specialized piece of medical imaging called a DAT scan.
Right. It's a non-invasive procedure designed to evaluate the integrity of the dopamine system.
From a patient's perspective, it requires about half a day, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's quite a process. You start by taking 2 iodine tablets, which are simply meant to block your thyroid gland from absorbing the radioactive material.
Got it. And then about an hour later, you receive an injection in your shoulder of a specific radioactive tracer.
Then you sit in a waiting room for about 4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah. While that tracer circulates through your bloodstream, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and enters your neural circuitry.
And that tracer is an ingenious molecular tool. It is specifically designed to seek out and bind tightly to the dopamine transporters in the striatum.
Exactly. After the 4-hour waiting period, the patient lies under a specialized gamma camera for 30 to 45 minutes.
And the camera detects the radiation emitted by the tracer.
Right. If you have Parkinson's disease, the resulting image will clearly show a dark void.
A stark depletion of dopamine transporters in the striatum because the substantia nigra has stopped supplying them.
Exactly. But if you have essential tremor, your dopamine factory is generally functioning normally. So the scan lights up brightly, showing healthy symmetrical dopamine transporter levels.
Okay, wait, hold on. This is where the medical literature gets incredibly murky.
Oh.
If the DAT scan is supposed to be this definitive binary test, depleted means Parkinson's, normal means ET, then how do we explain the studies in our stack showing a subset of essential tremor patients with, quote, in-between scan results?
Ah, yes. The gray area.
The scans aren't perfectly bright, but they aren't fully depleted either. That completely breaks the binary model. Is there a hidden connection between these two diseases?
You are pulling on the thread of one of the most controversial, intensely debated frontiers in movement disorder neurology today.
Seriously?
Oh, yeah. The official medical consensus maintains that they are completely distinct conditions. However, the longitudinal clinical overlap is impossible to ignore.
Meaning what happens over time?
Right. Having essential tremor appears to significantly increase a person's risk of developing Parkinson's disease later in life.
The epidemiological studies on that risk are staggering, yet they vary wildly depending on the cohort.
They really do.
Some studies suggest 3.1% of essential tremor patients later develop Parkinson's. Others put that number all the way up to 20.8%.
And one major longitudinal study tracked patients over several years and determined that those diagnosed with essential tremor were up to 4 times as likely to develop Parkinson's compared to the general population.
4 times as likely.
It entirely validates that 2 a.m. fear. An essential tremor diagnosis does not grant you immunity from Parkinson's.
Wow.
And the connection goes far deeper than epidemiological statistics. We have to revisit the pathology reports.
Yeah, what did they find?
In some of the brains belonging to patients who only ever had a clinical diagnosis of essential tremor, pathologists found Lewy bodies.
Lewy bodies. Those are abnormal, toxic clumps of a protein called alpha-synuclein, right?
Yes, they are the absolute hallmark pathological signature of Parkinson's disease.
Finding Parkinsonian Lewy bodies in an essential tremor brain is a massive paradigm shift.
It completely blurs the lines.
So, for the person listening to this who just noticed their hand shaking over their keyboard, this level of neurological complexity is dizzying.
It's a lot to take in.
If the conditions can overlap, if the DAT scans can fall into gray areas, and if Lewy bodies can cross over, relying on a single 15-minute doctor's appointment to figure this out is a profoundly flawed system.
It really is. It's a snapshot trying to capture a moving target.
Exactly.
Tremor is a dynamic, constantly fluctuating symptom, but the traditional clinical model treats it like a static measurement.
You wait 3 agonizing months to see a specialist.
You sit in the waiting room, your anxiety spikes, flooding your system with adrenaline.
You walk into the exam room for a brief 15 minutes, the physician asks you to hold your hands out, and they make a visual judgment.
And that brief window completely ignores the complex reality of your daily life.
We call that the daily life gap, because a tremor waxes and wanes based on a dizzying number of physiological triggers.
So many triggers. How many hours of restorative sleep did you get last night?
Are you currently under severe occupational stress?
Have you eaten recently, or is your blood sugar dipping?
Have you consumed caffeine? Because caffeine is a massive variable.
Oh, absolutely. Drinking more than 2 or 3 cups of coffee can induce a physiological tremor that perfectly mimics an essential tremor action shake.
So if you walk into that neurologist's office over-caffeinated, sleep-deprived, and terrified, the visual data the doctor is collecting is fundamentally corrupted by your environment.
Corrupted from the start. And relying on human memory to fill in that daily life gap is equally problematic.
Because human memory is notoriously subjective.
And deeply influenced by recency bias. If a physician asks you, how is your tremor over the last month? You are highly likely to base your answer on whatever happened most recently.
You might say, it was really terrible last Tuesday when I was trying to eat.
Right. That is an anecdote. It is not actionable medical data.
That is exactly why the paradigm is shifting toward patient empowerment through continuous objective measurement.
Tools like TremorZen AI from the Ending Tremor Project are completely changing the landscape.
You no longer have to rely on a flawed 15-minute snapshot or your own subjective memory. You can turn that 2 a.m. fear into rigorous longitudinal data through real-world tracking.
You can use your smartphone to measure the amplitude and frequency of your tremor in your actual natural environment.
While you are eating breakfast, while you are typing at work, or while you are relaxing on the couch.
It transfers the locus of control back to the patient. You stop being a passive subject waiting months for a physician to bestow a diagnosis upon you based on a corrupted snapshot.
You become an active, empowered investigator in your own neurology.
You track the impact of your sleep architecture, your stress markers, and your caffeine intake alongside the tremor data.
So when you walk into that clinical appointment, you aren't bringing anecdotes. You are bringing a rich, data-driven history.
It allows your care team to make vastly more accurate, personalized, and timely medical decisions.
Because when we measure more, we guess less.
Exactly.
So to bring all of this together, the initial discovery of a tremor is terrifying, and that fear is valid.
Totally valid.
But understanding the precise mechanical markers that separate essential tremor from Parkinson's disease, from the rapid frequency of an action shake versus the slower grind of a rest tremor,
To the shrinking momentum of micrographia.
to the complex structural realities inside the cerebellum and the substantia nigra, that knowledge strips the fear of its power. It puts you firmly back in the driver's seat of your own health.
Clarity always defeats panic. However, considering the deep, complex literature we have analyzed today, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to process.
Okay, lay it on us.
Given the strange, undeniable overlaps we have discussed, like the presence of Parkinsonian Lewy bodies in essential tremor brains, the subset of patients with those mysterious in-between DAT scan results, and the elevated statistical risk, what if essential tremor and Parkinson's aren't entirely isolated, distinct boxes?
Whoa.
What if they are actually interconnected points on a vast, incredibly complex spectrum of neuroexcitability that medical science is only just beginning to truly map?
That is a fascinating thought to end on. Well, don't forget to click and like this episode. That is, if you did like it, of course. And click the follow button. This is how you'll get a notification each time we have a new episode.